The sea was calm that morning, stretching endlessly under a pale sky. The humanitarian vessel. Solace Dawn moved gently over the blue waters, carrying a small crew of doctors, engineers, and aid workers. They had been at sea for several days, delivering supplies to remote islands and helping fishing communities hit by storms. It was a peaceful mission, one they had done many times before. But on that particular morning, everything changed when the radio operator caught a faint and broken signal, an SOS coming from somewhere far out in the Indian Ocean. At first, they thought it was just interference. The signal was weak, filled with static and broken words. But when they cleaned the frequency, a trembling voice came through. It was a man speaking in English, desperate and frightened. He said they were stranded on a ship with no power, running out of food and water. He begged for help, saying people were sick and dying. The message repeated twice before fading away into silence. The coordinates were vague, but the operator managed to trace them to a remote patch of ocean, hundreds of miles from any major route. Captain Adrian Holt, the man in charge of Solace Dawn, listened carefully. He was a man who had spent his life at sea, known for his calm and steady nature. He looked at his navigator and said quietly, "We go." No one questioned him. Helping those in need was what they were out there for. Within minutes, the crew adjusted their course toward the coordinates. The engines rumbled to life and the ship turned toward the endless horizon. As the hours passed, the air grew heavier. Clouds gathered and the sea darkened slightly. The crew tried to reach the stranded vessel again but got nothing but silence. The radio operator kept trying different channels, hoping the man would respond. Some of the younger crew members began whispering among themselves, wondering why the ship had no identification, no name, and why no nearby coast guards had picked up the distress signal first. Still, their mission was to save lives, and that was all that mattered. By evening, they reached the area. The coordinates pointed to an open stretch of water, with nothing but waves as far as the eye could see. Just when doubt began to grow, one of the lookouts shouted from the observation deck. On the horizon, a dark shape appeared, a large cargo ship drifting aimlessly, its hull rusted and its flag missing. There was something unsettling about the way it moved. No lights, no sound, no signal. It looked abandoned, like a ghost ship forgotten by time. The crew felt uneasy, but duty pushed them forward. Captain Holt ordered the floodlights on. The bright beams cut through the darkening sky, falling on the strange ship's deck. The name painted on the side was partly scratched off, only the letters KRA visible. Nobody recognized it. Still, the captain ordered the small rescue boats to be lowered. A team of 6 volunteers, 2 doctors, an engineer, and 3 sailors, climbed in and started rowing toward the silent vessel. The others watched in tense silence as the small boat drew closer. When the team reached the side of the ship, they called out several times, but no one answered. The air smelled of metal and salt and something else, something foul, like decay. They tied their boat and climbed the rope ladder up to the deck. The moment their boots touched the surface, the place felt wrong. Broken crates were scattered everywhere, and traces of dried blood stained the metal floor. One of the doctors felt her heart race. "This doesn't look like a supply ship," she whispered. The team moved carefully through the corridors. The lights were dead, the air thick with silence. They found rooms with signs of struggle, overturned chairs, torn uniforms, and strange metallic cases with locks broken open. Every door they opened revealed more confusion. The ship's control room was completely destroyed, and all communication systems were smashed. Whoever had been here, it seemed they didn't want to be found. Back on Solace Dawn, the captain grew anxious. The rescue team had stopped responding to radio calls. Static filled the speakers every time he tried to reach them. His instincts screamed that something was wrong. He looked at the radar screen, but it showed nothing unusual, just their own vessel and the drifting ship. Yet he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that they were being watched. On the ghost ship, the rescue team discovered a journal left behind in one of the cabins. It was written in mixed languages and half-burned, but one phrase kept repeating, "They are not who they say they are." The words chilled everyone. Before they could decide what to do, the ship's power suddenly flickered to life. Lights blinked and a low hum echoed through the hull. The engineer shouted, "The engines just came on and by themselves." Everyone froze. Then came the sound of metal creaking, like something massive shifting beneath the ship. Panic spread as the rescue team tried to retreat, but the ladder they had climbed earlier was gone, pulled up or broken away. They were trapped. From somewhere deep inside the cargo hold came a rhythmic banging, like someone or something trying to break free. The doctor screamed for help through her radio, but all that reached Solace Dawn was a burst of static and one final word. Run. The captain immediately ordered his crew to start engines and back away. But before they could move, their navigation system went dead. Every screen turned black, every compass spun wildly. The radio operator's face went pale. "We're being jammed," he said. Then out of nowhere, their radar picked up movement, several fast-moving objects approaching from the east. No one could identify them. They weren't ships, not aircraft, just unknown blips moving closer by the second. Fear gripped everyone. The captain shouted for all lights to be turned off. The sea around them was now dark except for the faint glow of the ghost ship. Suddenly, small flashes of light appeared on the horizon like distant lightning, but faster, sharper. The crew realized they were surrounded by unknown craft circling in silence. The captain's voice trembled slightly for the first time. "This wasn't a distress call," he said quietly. "It was a trap." The crew stared at the ghost ship as it slowly began to turn, its engines roaring back to life. It moved toward them, cutting through the water with unnatural speed. The sound was deafening. The captain tried to signal a retreat, but their systems were dead. In desperation, he ordered emergency flares to be fired. Red flames burst into the sky, sending a desperate cry for help across the empty sea. Miles away, satellites from multiple countries picked up those distress flares. The images showed a small humanitarian vessel, surrounded by strange, unidentified ships. Within minutes, emergency alerts spread across naval command centers. The world was waking up to something none of them understood yet. Back on Solace Dawn, chaos filled the decks. The crew tried to arm themselves with whatever they had, but they were a humanitarian ship. They carried no weapons. The captain looked once more at the ghost ship closing in, its lights flickering like dying stars. For a brief moment, he thought of the man's voice on the radio, the one who had begged for help. It had sounded so human, so desperate, but now it echoed in his mind differently, not as a cry for rescue, but as a lure. And then, in a moment of clarity, Captain Holt understood. The message had never been a call for aid. It was bait. The ocean that had once seemed endless and calm now felt like a trap set beneath the sky. The Solace Dawn floated silently, its crew waiting for whatever was coming next. Far above, satellites kept transmitting images to Earth, images that would soon shock the world and awaken something deep within humanity, a fury that had been sleeping for far too long. The rescue mission that was supposed to save lives had now turned into a nightmare. The humanitarian ship Solace Dawn floated silently in the middle of the dark ocean, surrounded by tension so thick that every sound made the crew jump. The captain stood near the bridge window, staring at the ghost ship that drifted beside them. Its lights flickered weakly and its engines gave off strange mechanical groans, as if the ship itself was alive and suffering. There was still no word from the rescue team that had gone aboard. Their radios remained dead, and their tracking beacons showed no signal. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Captain Holt tried to stay calm, but his heart was heavy with worry. The last word they had received, "Run," kept echoing in his mind. He didn't want to believe that something had happened to his people, but every passing minute made hope feel smaller. He ordered his first officer to scan the radar again, but the screen was still filled with static. No signals, no coordinates, nothing. Their navigation systems were still jammed. Down in the control room, the radio operator kept trying to contact nearby ships. He switched frequencies again and again, shouting into the mic. But all he got in return was the same crackling static. The rest of the crew gathered on deck, whispering in fear. Some wanted to leave immediately. Others argued they couldn't abandon their team. The night was getting darker and the waves were beginning to rise. Suddenly, one of the engineers pointed toward the ghost ship. "Look!" he shouted. Everyone turned. There on the side of the strange vessel, faint figures were moving, silhouettes of people stumbling across the deck. At first, relief filled the air. "They're alive!" someone cried. But then, as the light flickered again, they realized something was wrong. The figures were moving in an unnatural way, slow, stiff, almost robotic. Their faces were hidden in shadows, and none of them responded to the crew's calls. The captain grabbed his binoculars and looked closer. His hands trembled slightly. What he saw froze his blood. Those figures were wearing the same uniforms as the Solace Dawn rescue team, but their skin looked pale, and their movements were jerky, lifeless. They seemed to be walking without purpose, like puppets controlled by invisible strings. Before anyone could make sense of it, the ghost ship's lights turned off completely, plunging everything into darkness. The sound of the wind grew louder and the sea began to churn. Then, without warning, the ghost ship's floodlights suddenly came back on, blinding everyone for a moment. When the crew's eyes adjusted, the ship was much closer than before. It had moved silently through the water, almost touching the Solace Dawn. "Engines full reverse," the captain shouted. But the engine room responded with panic. "Sir, the controls aren't responding. It's like someone's locking the system from outside," the captain cursed under his breath. He grabbed the emergency override lever, but even that didn't work. The ship's systems were being controlled by something, or someone, unknown. Alarms began to blare, lights flashed, and the entire vessel started vibrating. The ghost ship let out a deep rumbling sound that echoed across the sea. It didn't sound mechanical, it sounded alive. Then came a loud metallic crash. Something had hit their hull. The ship rocked violently, throwing several crew members to the ground. They looked over the side and saw dark shapes in the water, small crafts or machines moving fast, circling around like sharks. No one could tell where they came from. Their surfaces reflected no light, their engines made no sound. Panic broke out. The crew tried to prepare life rafts, but the captain ordered them to stay together. "No one leaves this ship until I say so," he yelled. But fear was stronger than orders. Some of the younger sailors tried to lower the boats anyway. As soon as one raft touched the water, a beam of light shot from one of the dark crafts, slicing through the small boat like a knife. It exploded in flames, lighting up the sea for a few terrifying seconds. Everyone froze. They now knew they were surrounded by something far more dangerous than pirates. The ghost ship and the strange crafts were part of something organized, something intelligent. But what? The captain tried one last time to send a distress signal. He connected the emergency transmitter directly to the power core, bypassing the jammed circuits. The radio crackled, and finally a faint connection appeared. "Mayday, this is Solace Dawn. We are under attack," he shouted. The signal went out, but he didn't know if anyone heard it. Meanwhile, on the ghost ship, something strange began happening. The figures on deck stopped moving and stood still, all facing the same direction, toward Solace Dawn. A deep red glow appeared under the hull, lighting the water below. The glow grew brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Then the ghost ship released a high-pitched sound, a signal that made everyone on Solace Dawn cover their ears. It felt like it was drilling straight into their skulls. Several crew members collapsed in pain. The captain gritted his teeth, trying to stay conscious. He didn't understand what was happening, but his instincts screamed that this was not human technology. When the sound stopped, the water around them was eerily calm again. The dark crafts had vanished. The ghost ship floated silently once more. For a few minutes, nobody moved. Then a voice came through the broken radio. It wasn't from their missing team, it was something else. The voice spoke slowly in a tone that was both human and mechanical. "You came to help. You were not called for help. Leave now or be erased." The captain's face turned pale. He stared at the radio as if it had come alive. "Who is this?" "Identify yourself," he shouted. But the voice didn't answer. The radio went dead again. The crew began to argue. Some wanted to leave immediately. Others thought it might be a test or a trick. But before anyone could decide, the ocean around them began to bubble, as if something enormous was rising from below. The ship shook again, and the sound of creaking metal filled the air. Everyone ran to the railings. The dark water below seemed to glow faintly blue. Then, for just a second, they saw it. A massive shadow moving under the surface, larger than any submarine or creature they had ever seen. The captain realized they had to act fast. "Prepare emergency flares. Send them straight up," he ordered. The flares shot into the sky, bursting in bright red light. Miles away, satellites caught the flashes. Naval command centers in 3 different countries noticed them at the same time. They zoomed in on the location, and what they saw shocked them. 2 ships floating side by side, surrounded by unknown signals and electromagnetic interference. Within minutes, alarms went off across communication networks. Every major maritime authority received the coordinates. From Washington to Moscow, from Beijing to London, leaders were being alerted. The Solace Dawn's faint distress message had reached the world. Back at sea, the situation grew worse. The ship's lights flickered and their engine finally died. The ghost ship started moving again, slowly drifting away as if its mission was complete. The captain watched helplessly as it faded into the fog. He felt anger boiling inside him, anger at being tricked, at losing his people, at being powerless. But beneath that anger was something deeper: fear. As dawn approached, the sky began to brighten. The sea looked calm again, almost peaceful, as if nothing had happened. But the Solace Dawn was damaged and silent, its crew shaken to their core. Then suddenly a flash appeared on the horizon. Aircrafts, dozens of them flying in formation. Warships followed soon after, speeding through the waves. Humanity had heard the call. The captain stood on the bridge, staring at the approaching fleets. For the first time, he allowed himself to breathe. He didn't know who or what they had encountered, but now the world would see it too. The trap that had been set for one small humanitarian ship had just woken up something far greater: the united fury of mankind. And as the first warships surrounded the area, scanning the waters for any sign of the ghost ship, one thing became clear. Whoever had sent that false distress call had made a terrible mistake. They had wanted to lure humanity into fear and confusion. Instead, they had awakened its wrath. News of the Solace Dawn spread across the world like wildfire. Every major news channel, military base, and government office was talking about it. At first, people thought it was just another maritime accident. Maybe pirates, maybe equipment failure. But when fragments of the captain's last message were analyzed, the truth began to emerge. The voice recording, the strange interference, and the images captured by satellites told a darker story. The world realized that this was not a normal distress situation. It was a trap, a deliberate one. And it had cost the lives of the rescue crew who had only wanted to help. Inside command rooms across continents, the mood turned from confusion to anger. Humanity had been deceived through its own compassion. The call for help, which had touched hearts and moved people into action, had been nothing but bait. Whoever or whatever had done this had not only attacked a humanitarian ship but had also challenged the world's sense of safety. That was something no nation could ignore. In Washington, President Elaine Carter sat in the emergency situation room, watching the live satellite feed of the area where the Solace Dawn had last been seen. Around her were top admirals, intelligence officers, and scientists. The screen showed a massive section of the ocean glowing faintly blue, as if something powerful was beneath the surface. The admiral pointed at the display. "Madam President, this is not a natural phenomenon. Whatever caused this is emitting an energy field strong enough to jam global satellites." The room went silent. For the first time in decades, the world's most powerful nations were facing an unknown enemy. Similar meetings took place in Moscow, Beijing, London, and Tokyo. Despite years of political tension and rivalry, the tone of every discussion was the same. This was no longer about borders or competition. Humanity was under threat, and unity was no longer a choice but a necessity. Messages were exchanged between countries that had barely spoken for years. Military leaders who once planned against each other now shared intelligence openly. A new alliance was forming, one born not of politics but of survival. The international media named the event the Solace Incident. People around the world were glued to their screens. Families cried watching the faces of the lost crew. The recordings of Captain Holt's final words played again and again on the news. "This isn't a rescue. It's a trap." The public reaction was intense. Protests erupted in several cities demanding answers and action. Humanity's compassion had been taken advantage of, and now people wanted justice. In the following days, scientists analyzed the strange radio signal that had jammed the Solace Dawn. What they discovered shocked everyone. The signal had a pattern, not random noise, but coded transmissions that seemed to carry structured information. Linguists, cryptographers, and computer experts worked together, trying to decode it. It was not in any known human language, but it showed intelligence. Someone had deliberately crafted it. While governments worked to understand the threat, the oceans became the center of military attention. The United Nations called an emergency meeting, and for the first time in history, all major nations agreed on one thing: to combine their naval forces under one global command. The operation was given a name: Armada of Humanity. Within 72 hours, Warships from across the world began to move. The U.S. sent aircraft carriers, Russia deployed its nuclear submarines, Japan sent destroyers, France and the UK dispatched fleets. Even smaller nations contributed whatever they could: rescue ships, drones, and satellite support. Humanity was preparing to strike back. On the deck of one of the leading ships, Admiral Nicholas Vance looked out over the horizon. He had seen many conflicts in his lifetime, but nothing like this. Behind him, hundreds of ships followed, a sea of steel carrying flags from every corner of the world. He turned to his officers and said quietly, "They thought they could scare us. They thought we'd hide, but they woke something they never should have." His words spread across the communication network, replayed on screens aboard every vessel. It became the motto of the mission. They wanted aid, but awoke humanity's armada. Meanwhile, scientists on board mobile research ships continued studying the strange blue energy field near the Solace Dawn's last location. Drones sent underwater recorded images of twisted metal and shadows moving in the depths. Some of the footage was classified, but the parts that were leaked showed something terrifying. Structures deep below the surface, shaped like machines, but too large to be made by humans. The ocean had always hidden secrets, but this one was different. It seemed alive. Families of the lost crew gathered in coastal cities, watching as the world's largest naval force assembled. For many, it was personal. They wanted to believe that the missing could still be alive. Hope mixed with anger as they watched warships sail from ports. Across social media, one message spread rapidly: "For the Solace Dawn." People wrote it on banners, painted it on walls, and even tattooed it on their arms. It became a symbol of unity, proof that when one part of humanity was attacked, the rest would not stay silent. In the middle of this massive mobilization, something unexpected happened. One of the satellites picked up a signal, the same frequency as the original distress call, but coming from a different location. It was weaker, broken, but unmistakably similar. Some argued it was a trap. Others believed it could be survivors. The world watched as the signal repeated, faintly echoing across the communication channels. "Help. Us." Despite warnings, Admiral Vance made a decision. "We're not ignoring it," he said firmly. "If there's even one of ours alive, we're bringing them home." His command ship changed course, and the rest of the fleet followed. The world held its breath as the Armada moved toward the new coordinates. The sea grew darker as they approached. Radar systems flickered again, just like they had before. Static filled the radios and compasses spun wildly. The same signs that had doomed the Solace Dawn now surrounded the Armada. Yet no one turned back. The Admiral ordered every ship into defensive formation. Fighter jets launched into the sky, circling above the fleet like hawks. Suddenly, the ocean beneath them began to stir. The blue glow returned, spreading faster than before. On the monitors, sonar operators shouted, "Multiple contacts below us." "Hundreds of them!" The fleet prepared for engagement. Then out of the water rose dark metallic shapes. Not submarines, not known crafts, but something alien and terrifying. They moved like living machines, sleek and silent. For a brief moment, time froze. Then humanity's wrath was unleashed. Missiles lit the sky and explosions thundered across the sea. The night turned into day as fire rained down from the ships and aircraft. The battle had begun. It was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The enemy crafts fought back with strange energy pulses that disabled electronics and created shockwaves in the water. Ships were hit, but none retreated. Every nation fought side by side, united in one purpose: to defend their own and to strike back against the betrayal. Back on land, billions watched live satellite feeds. They saw the flashes, the fire, the smoke. Reporters described it as the day the world stood as one. Children in schools, elders in hospitals, people in cafes and homes. Everyone prayed for the Armada. The world had forgotten its divisions. Now it was just humanity versus the unknown. In the chaos of battle, Admiral Vance received a transmission from one of the drones flying over the battlefield. It was faint but clear, an image of the missing Solace Dawn crew trapped inside a metal structure beneath the waves. They were alive, but barely. The Admiral ordered immediate rescue operations. Divers were deployed despite the danger, and after hours of struggle, a few survivors were pulled from the ocean. Their stories were horrifying. They spoke of being captured, of hearing voices that weren't human, of machines studying them as if they were experiments. When news of their rescue reached the world, Cheers and tears filled every city. But the survivors' words also brought a chilling truth. This attack had been planned long before. The distress call wasn't random. It was a test and a way to see how humanity would react. And now, humanity had answered. The battle raged for hours, but slowly, the enemy forces began to retreat. The ocean swallowed them once again, leaving behind silence and burning wreckage. The Armada stood victorious, though wounded. Thousands of sailors had given their lives. But they had proven one thing beyond doubt, that humanity, when united, was unstoppable. As the sun rose over the horizon, the surviving crew of the Solace Dawn watched from the deck of a rescue ship. The sea was calm again, but they knew it would never look the same. They had seen what lay beneath. They had witnessed the cost of compassion and the power of unity. And somewhere deep below, the remnants of the enemy waited in the darkness, watching, learning. But this time, humanity was ready. They had been awakened, and they would never be caught sleeping again. The morning after the great battle was quiet, but the ocean still carried the smell of smoke and metal. Pieces of destroyed ships floated across the waves, and the air was heavy with the memory of what had happened. The fleet, humanity's great armada, had survived, but at a heavy cost. Thousands of sailors and officers were gone, and many ships were damaged beyond repair. Yet for the first time in history, every nation had fought together as one. They had faced something unknown, something powerful, and they had not backed down. Admiral Nicholas Vance stood on the deck of his flagship, staring at the horizon. His face was tired, covered in ash and salt, but his eyes were sharp. He knew the battle wasn't truly over. The enemy had vanished into the deep, retreating like shadows into darkness. But experience told him, an enemy that retreats is not defeated, only waiting. Around him, crew members were busy repairing systems, helping the wounded and recovering what they could from the wreckage. The survivors of the Solace Dawn were brought aboard under heavy guard, weak but alive. The Admiral made sure they were treated first. The survivors looked haunted. They spoke little, but their eyes told everything. Fear, exhaustion, and the kind of pain only people who had seen the impossible could understand. One of them, a doctor named Sarah Lynn, sat in the medical bay staring out of the small window. When Admiral Vance came to see her, she didn't even turn at first. Then in a quiet voice she said, "They weren't trying to kill us. They were trying to learn from us." The Admiral frowned. "Learn?" She nodded. "They took our technology apart piece by piece. They studied our language, our behavior, even our reactions to fear. They knew exactly how to make us come to them. They wanted to see how we respond to kindness, to a call for help." Those words hit the Admiral harder than any weapon. The attack had not been just an ambush. It had been an experiment. Someone or something had wanted to understand humanity, its compassion, its weakness, its strength. And now, humanity had given its answer. In the days that followed, ships searched the area for signs of the enemy, but the ocean was eerily empty. Sonar detected strange readings at times, deep vibrations, unnatural movements, but nothing concrete. It was as if the enemy had melted into the sea itself. The scientists aboard the Armada studied the strange metal fragments recovered from the battle. They were unlike any material known to Earth, stronger than steel yet flexible like organic tissue. Every piece seemed to hold traces of energy that pulsed faintly, as if alive. The more they studied it, the more questions appeared. One night, while the Admiral was reviewing reports, an urgent message came from the sonar deck. The operator's voice trembled as he spoke. "Sir, we're detecting something large under the fleet. Very large." Everyone rushed to the screens. The sonar showed a massive shape moving slowly beneath them, bigger than an aircraft carrier. The Admiral immediately ordered all ships to full alert. Alarms echoed across the fleet. Lights turned red and crews rushed to battle positions. But before any action could be taken, the shape stopped. For a long minute, nothing happened. Then the sonar picked up a sound, a deep rhythmic pulse. It wasn't an attack signal. It was something else, almost like a heartbeat. The entire ocean seemed to hum with it. The sound traveled through the water, through the ships, through the people themselves. The survivors of the Solace Dawn began to panic. "It's them," one shouted. "They're talking to us again." But this time the Admiral didn't run. He stood tall, staring at the ocean, and said quietly, "If you want to talk, then talk." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the communication systems flickered on their own. The screens turned black and a strange static sound filled the bridge. Slowly an image appeared, not clear but enough to see movement. It was a figure, tall and slender, surrounded by blue light. A voice followed, soft but cold. "You fought well. You are not weak." The Admiral's crew froze. The voice continued. "We wanted to see if your kind could stand together. You did. But remember, unity born of anger does not last." The Admiral stepped forward. "Who are you?" he demanded. The voice didn't answer directly. "We are what you will become if you forget what mercy is." And then the image faded and the sound stopped. The sea was quiet again. The message left everyone speechless. Scientists tried to analyze the signal but couldn't trace its origin. The Admiral realized the enemy hadn't been just some alien fleet. They were something far more advanced, maybe something that had existed on Earth long before humans ever did. But whether they were trying to warn or threaten, no one knew. After that encounter, the United Nations declared Operation Echo Vengeance officially over. The Armada would return to port for repairs and rest. But the Admiral knew it was only the beginning of a larger story. Humanity had shown its strength, but now it carried a responsibility to remain united, to protect the world from what lay beyond the horizon. As the fleet began its slow journey back, the survivors of the Solace Dawn were given medals and honors. They had endured what no one else had, captivity by an unknown force, torture, and fear. Yet they had left behind clues that had saved millions. The world hailed them as heroes. Streets were filled with parades when the ships returned home. Flags waved and people cheered, celebrating what they believed was victory. But in the quiet moments after the celebrations ended, the heroes themselves didn't feel victorious. Dr. Sarah Lynn often woke up at night hearing the same sound, that heartbeat echoing in her dreams. Captain Holt, though alive, never spoke publicly again. He spent most of his time alone by the sea, staring at the waves, as if waiting for something to return. Meanwhile, scientists continued their studies of the strange technology recovered from the battle. They discovered that the metal fragments contained microstructures that reacted to brainwaves. In simple terms, the material could sense thought. It was as if it was designed to understand whoever touched it. Governments quickly classified the findings, fearing public panic. Officially, they said it was debris from an unknown experimental vessel. But the truth was known to those who had been there. This was not human creation. Months later, a small team of researchers working on one of the fragments discovered something extraordinary. When exposed to specific sound frequencies, the same ones used in the distress call, the metal emitted light and produced coded signals. The patterns matched part of the language the survivors had heard from their captors. That meant one thing. The enemy had left something behind intentionally. A message. When Admiral Vance learned of it, he gathered his top officers. He listened carefully as the scientists played the audio. It wasn't words this time, but a rhythm, a slow repeating sequence that, when translated into binary code, spelled a single phrase. "We will return when you forget." Those words sent chills down everyone's spine. The Admiral looked at his officers and said, "Then we'll make sure we never do." Under his command, nations began working together like never before. Shared intelligence, global defense systems, and new technology inspired by the recovered materials. Humanity was advancing faster than it ever had. For once, countries that had fought for power now shared it. Old enemies became partners. The fear of another attack united them more than treaties ever could, but not everyone agreed. Some politicians warned that fear could also divide. "Unity built on fear will not last forever," one leader said. "When the memory fades, we will return to our old ways." The Admiral knew those words were true, and he worried about that day. Still, for now, peace returned. The ocean was once again calm, hiding its secrets under endless blue. Ships sailed the waters without fear, but every captain knew the story of the Solace Dawn. It was taught in schools, written in books, and told to children before bed. A story about the day humanity's kindness was used against it, and how that same kindness turned to fury had saved the world. In the quiet of his cabin, Admiral Vance looked out at the sea for what might be the last time. He had grown old, but his eyes were still as sharp as the day he led the Armada. He whispered softly to the horizon, "You tested us." We answered, "If you ever come again, you'll find us waiting." Far beneath the waves, deep in the cold darkness where sunlight never reached, something stirred, faint blue lights blinking in the abyss. The sound of a distant heartbeat returned, slow and steady. The ocean, calm on the surface, was alive below, and so humanity waited, not in fear but in readiness. They had been deceived once, but never again. They had been pushed to fight, and they had learned their strength. The world would never forget the lesson of that day. Mercy without caution can be dangerous, but strength without mercy can destroy everything. And between those two truths, humanity had finally found its balance. The ocean had returned to a deceptive calm. The waves shimmered under the rising sun, but for those who had lived through the events of the past months, the memory of chaos and fire at sea never faded. Humanity had been tested like never before, and the story of the Solace Dawn had become a lesson etched in every corner of the world. The survivors of the ship, the crew of the Armada, and even ordinary people who had watched the events unfold from their homes knew that the world would never be the same again. Captain Adrian Holt, now retired from active service, often stood at a small pier in his hometown, staring at the horizon. To the casual observer, it looked like he was simply enjoying the sea breeze. But in his mind, he replayed the events that had nearly cost him his life, and the lives of his crew. He remembered the silent cries of the stranded ship, the eerie stillness when they first boarded, and the fear that gripped him when the unknown forces began to surround them. Every detail remained sharp, like photographs burned into his memory. The world had rallied together in ways that no one had imagined. Nations that had long been rivals had coordinated their fleets, shared intelligence, and strategized as one unified force. The Armada of Humanity, as the media had called it, had not only rescued the surviving crew, but had also sent a powerful message to the unknown enemy. Humanity was not weak, and compassion alone could not be exploited. The Armada's victory was not just military, and it was symbolic. It proved that when people set aside differences, united by purpose and principle, they could face even the most unimaginable threats. The surviving crew members of the Solace Dawn were honored worldwide. They were celebrated not only for their bravery, but for their resilience in the face of horror. Each survivor carried with them scars, some visible, others hidden in memory. Sarah Lynn, the ship's doctor, often spoke at international conferences, describing the ordeal with a calm precision that belied the trauma she had endured. She told the world how the crew had been manipulated, tested, and studied by forces beyond human understanding. Her words left listeners in awe, combining sorrow, anger, and inspiration in equal measure. Governments and scientists studied the materials recovered from the enemy fleet. These strange metals and devices were unlike anything ever found on Earth. They were strong, light, and responsive, capable of adapting to environmental changes and even responding to human thought patterns. Laboratories worked around the clock, trying to reverse engineer the technology, hoping to gain an understanding of the forces that had attacked them. Every breakthrough, every discovery, reminded humanity that they had barely glimpsed the potential of what lay beneath the waves, and possibly beyond the stars. Meanwhile, ordinary people began to see the lessons in their everyday lives. Schools taught children about the importance of vigilance alongside compassion. Communities organized drills and emergency plans, no longer taking safety for granted. Across the globe, people were more aware of the fragility of life and the responsibility that came with it. The story of the Solace Dawn was told in homes, classrooms, and gatherings, not just as a tale of fear, but as a symbol of courage and unity. Even as humanity celebrated its survival, the enemy remained a lingering mystery. Deep beneath the ocean, remnants of the hostile force lay hidden, observing, learning, and waiting. The blue glow beneath the waves was still present, faint but persistent, and sonar readings occasionally detected movements too vast to be human-made. Scientists warned that what humanity had faced once might return, not as an immediate threat, but as a test of vigilance and unity. This knowledge instilled a sense of determination. Humanity could not afford complacency, because the lessons of the past had shown just how quickly compassion could be manipulated and misused. Admiral Nicholas Vance, now an advisor to a global maritime coalition, worked tirelessly to prepare humanity for any future encounters. His strategy emphasized readiness, cooperation, and moral strength. He believed that the greatest weapon humanity had was not missiles or warships, but the ability to come together in times of crisis. Under his guidance, International naval exercises became common, and nations shared knowledge and resources as never before. The Armada that had been formed in a time of fear now became a permanent symbol of human resilience and foresight. The surviving crew of the Solace Dawn often met privately to reflect on their experiences. They shared memories, fears, and hopes, forming a bond stronger than any ordinary friendship. They spoke of the terror they had faced, of the strange lights and movements under the ocean, and of the eerie messages from the unknown force. But more than that, they spoke of humanity's response, how the world had united to save them, how ordinary people and global leaders alike had shown courage in the face of uncertainty. These discussions helped them heal, and reminded them that even in the darkest moments, humanity could rise above fear. Months later, technology inspired by the recovered materials began to influence everyday life. Ships became safer and faster, powered by energy-efficient systems derived from the alien metals. Communication devices were fortified against interference, and global monitoring networks improved, capable of detecting anomalies far beyond conventional detection methods. Humanity was advancing not just in response to a threat, but because it had learned the value of knowledge and foresight. Each innovation carried the memory of the Solace Dawn crew and the lessons of the ocean's mystery. The world also embraced a new sense of unity on a cultural level. Art, literature, and media reflected the story of the battle, the loss, and the triumph of the human spirit. Films depicted the courage of the crew, music echoed the tension and eventual hope, and books chronicled every detail of the Armada's formation and the battle beneath the waves. These creative works reminded humanity that the event was not just a military encounter, but a profound lesson about morality, strength, and the consequences of compassion when exploited. Over time, the survivors returned to normal life, but they carried with them a perspective few others could understand. Captain Holt resumed teaching navigation and maritime safety, sharing practical knowledge but also lessons about caution, courage, and leadership. Sarah Lynn continued her medical work, often traveling to remote areas to provide aid, driven by a commitment to help despite the danger she had faced. Every action they took was influenced by the memory of what had happened at sea, the danger, the betrayal, and ultimately, the triumph of human unity. The phrase, "they wanted aid," but awoke humanity's Armada became a symbol for resilience and collective strength. It was repeated in speeches, written in history books, and used in schools as a lesson on vigilance, compassion, and cooperation. Humanity had been deceived once, but the response had been extraordinary. The phrase reminded everyone that even in moments of vulnerability, there was power in unity. It taught that mercy must be tempered with awareness, and that compassion could coexist with strength. Years later, when new recruits joined global naval fleets, they were shown footage and records of the Solace Dawn incident. They trained with the knowledge that the ocean still held unknown forces, and that vigilance was not just about physical readiness, but about moral clarity and unity. They learned that humanity's greatest strength lay not in weapons alone, but in the willingness of people to stand together in the face of deception, fear, and uncertainty. And yet, despite all preparations, the world never forgot the lessons of that day. Even as life returned to normal, the faint glow beneath the waves remained a silent reminder. Scientists occasionally detected subtle disturbances in the ocean, signals too organized to be natural. They could not identify the source, but they knew one thing. The force that had attacked the Solace Dawn was still there, waiting, observing. Humanity had survived, but survival required constant vigilance. In homes, schools, and workplaces, the story inspired conversations about responsibility. Leaders emphasized that every citizen had a role to play, not just in defending the world, but in fostering cooperation and understanding. The global alliance formed in response to the crisis became more than a military coalition. It was a blueprint for international collaboration, combining technology, strategy, and moral guidance. Humanity had not only fought back, it had grown wiser and stronger. The surviving crew and families of the lost sailors visited memorials erected in honor of the brave. These memorials were not just for remembrance. They were symbols of determination. Children played around statues depicting the heroism of those who had risked everything. People left flowers, letters, and messages of gratitude, ensuring that the sacrifices would never be forgotten. The memorials became places of reflection, teaching generations that courage, unity, and vigilance were more than words. They were actions that could shape the future. As decades passed, the ocean gradually reclaimed the battle sites. Rusted debris sank, currents carried remnants far away, and the waters appeared serene once more. But humanity's memory of the event remained vivid. Generations grew up learning the story, understanding the danger of unchecked deception and the importance of standing together. The planet had witnessed a rare moment of global unity, forged in the crucible of fear and tested by the unknown. Ultimately, the story of the Solace Dawn was not just about a ship lost at sea or an ambush that nearly destroyed it. It was about the awakening of humanity itself, a reminder that the world's greatest strength lay in its people when they stood together. The survivors, the fleets, and every nation involved had learned that compassion must be protected by awareness, that courage required both heart and mind, and that unity could turn fear into power. Even today, when sailors look out over the endless horizon, they see more than water and sky. They see the memory of bravery, the lesson of vigilance, and the promise that humanity will face whatever comes next, together. The ocean may hold secrets and the unknown may still watch silently from the depths, but humanity has awakened, stronger than ever. The day the call for help became a call to arms proved that when people unite, no threat, no matter how alien or powerful, can stand against them. And so, the story ends not with fear, but with hope. Humanity had been tested, deceived, and challenged, but in response it had risen, wiser, stronger, and more united. The message was clear: mercy and vigilance, compassion and courage can coexist. Humanity had awakened its greatest power, and it would never sleep again